Can you get island fever on an island paradise? I spent 2 years in Florida, which was surprising because most of the military types there said that no one ever left. The retired Navy and Air Force civilians could attest to that. But for the most part, military personnel only lasted up to 8 years before they had to move on to another base. I feel like it's very smart to move your personnel every few years as they get a better understanding of how to do their job in different environments. There's also the option to cross-train, so that helps as well to make a very well-rounded military individual. When I got orders to Guam, I was ecstatic. So far, I had ridden my first airplane and been to Texas, Florida, New Orleans, Missouri, Kansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. And now I would fly across the ocean and live on an island. Could my life get any more exciting? I flew home to see my family, and then I was off to see the world. At this point, I had been off on my own for 3 years. I say on my own because all of us new airmen in the Air Force are now under the wing of Mother Air Force. Remember her? She's great. Therefore, unless we were out there living on the economy, living away from the confines of the military base, then we aren't really on our own. So I wasn't on my own until my friend Shannon and I got our apartment in Guam. But we'll get to that. Guam was a small U.S. island territory in Micronesia. The local people were called Chamorros, and they were very friendly unless they felt threatened or disrespected. I remember one of my first days there, I was on a beach with some friends, and some of the locals offered us their freshly made beef kelaguen without asking for anything in return. We were just sitting on a cement picnic bench, hanging out, and up walked these complete strangers. This was all normal. When you left the base, you became a part of the island, and you could fight it if you wanted, or you could stand in the rain and listen to the sounds of the island while the lights and the people danced around you like you weren't there. But at the same time, you were all part of their movement. Guam was beautiful on so many levels. The entire trip in a car around the island took around 3 hours. I don't remember exactly because I was in the passenger seat listening to and belting out Shakira while pointing out different places to stop for photos. Just so we're all clear, I sound like a dying cat when I sing. So Shakira's soul was probably crying out in misery when this was happening. At the naval base, you could rent out snorkeling equipment and you could spend all day at various beaches watching the local sea life. On one occasion, I remember bringing an underwater camera and taking pictures of the clownfish and sea cucumbers without even contemplating the possibility that something predatorial could have been waiting around the next bend. What did my mother always say about swimming and doom? I remember that when Lucas and I went our separate ways, I wasn't completely heartbroken. And yet, I wanted to try to be the dutiful wife and give things a shot of working out. I stayed in the Saipan Hall dorms on the second floor. I had a room that had joined another girl who was close to my age via the bathroom. Her name was Christy. The first day I was there, I left my door to the bathroom unlocked, not thinking, and in the middle of the night, my quote-unquote piss mate, that's what we called them, Christy, came into the room, laid down at the end of my bed, and fell asleep. I remained still for a good 15 minutes, awake, trying to figure out what exactly I should do. I figured she sleptwalked like my sister Katie, and I also used to do when we were very young. So I left her be, and eventually I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up and she was gone, and I didn't bring it up. Weeks later, she approached me and told me in front of several of her friends downtown in Guam, near the bar scene, that I was the coolest girl in the world because I didn't run my mouth about what had happened. I looked at her and said I didn't think anything about it. She was a female firefighter, built like a rock, with long, wavy, reddish-brown hair that she kept in a braid or a ponytail most of the time. I ended up making her not so happy once, in my depressed state, when I decided to blast Killing Me Softly by the Fugees for several hours straight while I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. I think we were even after that. However, I wasn't looking to take out my loneliness on her. In the beginning, I was adamant about leaving my door open so that everyone could see that I wasn't doing anything a married woman shouldn't be doing. One of my close friends, Monj, reminded me later in life that they would ask to hang out, and I would tell them, I'm studying the PDG. This was the Professional Development Study Guide for each individual career field that prepared you for the test that, if you passed, led to your promotion. My room was set up with the same government-issued twin-size bed, wardrobe, and refrigerator like an Eglin. but this time I didn't have a roommate who slept in the same room as me. I did find comfort in the familiarity of the furnishings. My bed was positioned in the middle of the room, flush against the furthest wall, so that when laying down, I could see who was walking past my door. I had a computer desk. This was something we didn't have at Eglin, and I set my computer up at the desk so it made kind of a barricade. I could hide behind it if I wanted privacy. Eventually, people started stopping by to meet the new girl in the dorms. Needless to say, the sounds of laughter and overall hilarity lured me out. I think I lasted a month. Someone in my organization offered to give me a tour of the base and its surroundings, and it was funny because not more than a few days of being there, my soon-to-be new group of friends, Michelle, Shannon, Monge, Schneiders, Dave, Sean, Cody, the other Sean, and Gunther, warned me to stay away from him because they said he was a bottom feeder that tried to hook people that just got to the base since they didn't know any better. He seemed like a nice enough guy, but I was married and not remotely interested. It was interesting that this may have been the first time a group of my friends looked out for me in this way. In Florida, Jeannie and I kind of did our own things when we weren't going out to the beach or dancing. One of my coworkers introduced me to snorkeling, which I would be forever grateful for. We went to Gab Gab Beach near the Navy base, and we rented snorkeling gear nearby. I was a little pensive at first because new experiences always made me a little nervous, but JT explained how everything worked, and we brought our gear to the water's edge where we sat down on the rocky coral and put it on before plunging into the cool water. Into a whole new world, as the Little Mermaid would put it. We snorkeled above a multi-story of colorful canyons of coral, including brain coral the size of Volkswagen. And we watched the clownfish the size of my hand in anemone colonies as big as ping pong tables. I had a cheap underwater camera that I used to take photos of the barracudas swimming in groups. However, I never got close enough to the massive eel that popped eerily in and out of its cavernous hole close to where we entered the water. That sea creature was one that I did not want to have a close personal experience with. This wouldn't be the last time I snorkeled at Gab Gab Beach, and I found, thanks to another friend, that the fish liked ramen noodles, so we brought dinner. What I like most about snorkeling, as opposed to learning how to scuba dive, which I never did, was that I was in control of when I breathed and when I let myself see through the eyes of the ocean. I never liked the feeling of not being in control because a lot of my life has had me in exactly that situation. The concept of being hundreds of miles beneath the ocean with only a tank to rely on did not give me the urge to learn. I was perfectly happy with some fins and my cheap plastic snorkel, which allowed me to immerse myself into the underwater world of tranquility, teeming with life. The colors were vibrant and the synchronized movements of the fish were hypnotic. I could lazily float at the very top and be privy to a whole life that for the most part was unaware of my existence until I flapped my not so graceful arms and legs. I wish I had taken part in this activity more frequently. I celebrated New Year's of 2000 in Tumon Bay with Michelle, my new buddy from Nebraska. She worked for Outpatient Records in the same building that I worked in, so we saw each other often. She had a penchant for chewing tobacco that I always thought was odd, but she was quite pretty and she was always laughing. Michelle was about my height at 5'6", thin with long, straight honey brown hair. Her bangs cut straight across her forehead at almost eye level. I never saw her straighten her hair and still didn't know that was a thing at this point. So I think it was just naturally straight. She had a slightly upturned nose and the sweetest almond eyes that made her look completely innocent. When she smiled, you could just imagine a sweet little girl that could do absolutely no harm. But I knew her better. During the New Year's festivities at the beach on Tumon Bay, we both thought it was a great idea to strip down to our undergarments and jump in the ocean. I didn't think it through, and later, I was shown a video of a luckily very far away shot of us swimming and having innocent fun in the water. I'm also surprised that we didn't tear up our feet considering the floor of the ocean was made up of rough coral. All in all, it was pretty harmless, but we could have gotten into some serious trouble considering we were in the Air Force and swimming in your skivvies. They were honestly more conservative than a lot of bathing suits I've seen. This could have been considered conduct unbecoming. I followed the rules for the most part, but when I was off duty with friends and alcohol was involved, I made some pretty bad decisions, as did a lot of airmen. On another occasion, Michelle and I decided to put on bicycle helmets. Who knows where they came from, because we didn't have bicycles, and ran around our dorms laughing and whooping it up. We just about got our butts beat when we banged on Shannon's door in the middle of the night screaming, "Who wrote this?" from the 1999 movie The Haunting. Shannon's boyfriend Dave opened her door, his thick tangle of dark hair in disarray, and his deep brown eyes tired and annoyed, staring at us like we had lost our mind. Michelle was a goofball, but she was harmless. She was dating Sean the whole time we were there, and I don't know where she ended up going, unfortunately. I believe she was the one that introduced me to a local beach bum that we always ended up seeing and hanging out with when we were all at the beach drinking tequila Ritas. I mention that because the situation was just something I never would have imagined myself in. I don't think that I'd ever seen a bum up until that point, which is strange considering I was 21 years old. However, it's more likely that I never noticed them before. Growing up in Michigan, you wouldn't have a large homeless population considering it's freezing cold. And other than areas in the countryside that could be used to squat, there aren't a lot of options as far as long-term, warm living arrangements. I was only in Texas for basic military training and then tech school, and I didn't have a long leash during either of those times. So even if there were homeless people, I wouldn't have seen them. Florida is a little strange that I haven't seen bums because we were always on the beach. But again, it's all in what you're seeing, regardless of where you are. I was never looking for homeless people to watch or to interact with, and therefore I just didn't notice that part of life. In Guam, Michelle was friends with at least this specific beach bum, and through her, I became his friend along with others that he hung out with. They weren't any different than any of us. They just didn't have a house. They were fun, and they were always nice to us. But at the same time, they were drunk almost every time we saw them. I remember once, Michelle told me never to share a drink with them because one of them had caught a mouth disease from a cat. I don't know if that was true or not, but I didn't share my drink. It was funny the way Michelle looked out for me like I was her kid sister. We were the same age and basically in the same boat, and yet she was always popping up, checking on me, or asking if I wanted to hang out. Once we went to the park next to the track that I would run on, and we climbed around in the kids' jungle gym and went down the slide. We were kids, and we were both still naive. I think something may have happened between her and Sean, or maybe I'm forgetting, and she had to PCS. But at some point, while I was living with Shannon off base, Sean started dating one of Shannon's friends named Tammy. Tammy was from New Jersey, I think, or somewhere on the East Coast. And once Tammy started showing up, I don't remember seeing Michelle anymore. Our little group was always going to the beach or having parties in the dorms. So many times I think about how I managed to stay in the Air Force because I was just completely irresponsible. A lot of us were. Once, a friend of mine went drinking on a Sunday on the beach and woke up so hungover in the morning that when they got to work, they threw up on the lawn and the captain sent them home sick. I still wonder if he knew the true cause of the illness. Our mutual friend Monge brought them a loaf of bread since they let him borrow their truck for the day. This was how we took care of each other. No questions, no judgment. We were all just living in the same fishbowl and we figured we might as well have fun. There were so many things you could do on this small island that you forgot that you were so far away from a lot of things. The base had its own beach, Terang Beach, that we all went to for office functions, and sometimes my friends and I went there because it was so close. We would watch the sand crabs scuttle along the crystal clear water's edge and wander around soaking up the sun. Once I drove out there with a friend and we sat in the back of my GMC Jimmy truck and watched the stars. It was so quiet that you felt like you were the only person in the world. Speaking of things I did alone, I ran a lot on Anderson Air Force Base, and it rained a lot on Guam. So I ran in the rain quite a bit. The track also had its resident Mariana crows that like to dive bomb you every time you passed them. You got quite a workout running in the rain, ducking down every time the shiny black crows swooped behind you. At one point, I debated running with a long stick to swing at them when they came. Wouldn't that have been a sight? A coworker and friend of mine, Paula, liked to get me to run on the beach with her. She was a petite 25-year-old Indian girl with long, thick, wavy black hair and huge, soul-searching brown eyes that would bore into you deviously as she tried to get you to come in on a plan of hers, mostly involving men. Paula would turn to me while we were lounging on the beach, and her Cupid's bow-shaped lips would pucker as she huskily said, "Let's run on the beach," so we'd drive all the guys crazy watching us. I would laugh at her, but I always complied. I don't know if anyone was really looking, and as fit as we were back then, we still weren't built like Baywatch movie stars. So I think the scene that came across was probably more comical than sexy for anyone witnessing it. I saw my first coconut tree in Guam, and I listened to the rain for the first time in my life while standing outside of the Hard Rock Cafe after a night of dancing with my friends. Have you ever actually listened to the rain? The sound of nature just doing its thing while you stand dead center in the middle of it is energizing. You feel like your skin is on fire with an electrical buzz. Guam gave me an appreciation for nature and the small, typically overlooked things in life. It also assisted with some of my more self-destructive traits, mostly fueled by alcohol and loneliness. Somewhere in between meeting Michelle and deciding my marriage was doomed, I met one of my best friends I would have on this island. I've had several over the years. I think we've already covered the concept of multiple best friends. Bree was about 5'4", thin, pretty with a large forehead, smallish almond eyes, medium-sized lips, and a moderately athletic body. She reminded me of someone who taught yoga. In fact, now that I think about it, I believe that's what she did. She shared a house with several people, and I met her at a football game on Anderson Air Force Base when I struck up some dorky conversation. Bree and I would go to the beach together with the first group of friends I had, and we would lounge around. Once we drove around the entire island with my coworker JT and another friend Alex, and we took short breaks anywhere that we felt like stopping, snacking on bananas and taking photos of the rolling hills and densely forested land surrounding us. At one location, we saw a statue of Chief Gado in his canoe, which was riddled with bullet holes because the locals are said to get a little trigger happy during their celebrations. Gado is a legendary chief of the village on Inaran in southern Guam. We also stopped at a horse ranch / petting zoo, which was past Humidic, and Bree was able to pet some friendly little pigs. Bree loved pigs. They were about the size of a small cat, and I think they liked her as much as she liked them. It was funny because my mom told me before I left for Guam that she bet the goats on Guam would be small enough to fit into your palm. At the petting zoo, I found some goats, and I reassured her, confirming with photographs, that at least those goats were the same size as her own. Maybe palm-sized goats were found deeper in the island's dense foliage. Bree must have been on the island longer because she knew some secret spots where you could pull off and walk along what appeared to be sandbars and tide pools, the cool water rushing around your ankles. It was never truly cold in Guam. In December 2000, it was 78 degrees. I also never remember it being overbearingly hot. If it weren't for the isolation, I think I could have been quite happy on that island for a long time. But then it wouldn't be an island if it were not isolated, I guess. Fun fact. In 1972, after 28 years of hiding in the jungles of Guam, local farmers discovered Shochi Yoko, a Japanese sergeant who was unaware the war had ended. There's isolation for you. There are times when I'm feeling overwhelmed that I threaten jokingly that I'm going to live in a hole in the mountain. I'm betting that I wouldn't last the length of a war, though. About the time I started hanging out with Bree, she left, and I think she may have gotten tired of me getting out of control crazy when we partied. Basically, imagine a kid that's had too much sugar bouncing around like a spider monkey. She was always trying to tell me I was better than a lot of the things I was doing to myself, and instead of listening, I went the other way. She was genuinely a good person. I did try to find her after I heard she left. I went to her apartment and knocked, but no one was home. I left a pig carved out of wood on her doorstep. Lucas decided to visit me 6 months into his tour in Korea, and I took him around the island. We stopped at all the places I would have thought to go. Two Lovers Point, Spanish Steps, Talifofo Falls, all the touristy places. We even went to the annual office Christmas party where we got all decked out. I wore a beautiful black form-fitting velvet dress with red piping curving vertically from around the bottom of the waist and finishing at the top of my neck with a red embroidered flower. We hung out with all the people in my office and ended the night partying in one of the officers' room until the hotel employee told us we needed to go turn in for the night. It was a lot of fun, but I knew by that time that it just wasn't going to work. Needless to say, we still went on a trip to Bali while he was visiting. In June 2000, we boarded a very expensive airplane ride to get to a very inexpensive location in Indonesia. Our hotel provided tour guides, and ours was Ergurig Putra. He was wonderful. He was rather tall, and his thick, full black hair was pulled into a short ponytail. Aguirre took us anywhere we wanted to go for a very cheap fare and a small tip. And somehow, he always knew when we were ready because he was waiting right outside the hotel next to his car. Funny story about tips. Up until Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, I didn't understand the concept of a tip. When I worked at the Chicken Chalet at Bangor, I received one tip from my mother, and it consisted of a note. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I've mentioned that our family has an odd sense of humor. I remember the trip to Kuta City, where we stopped at an indoor/outdoor shopping area full of incense, art, and beautifully crafted sarongs and scarves. There were so many brilliant colors. It was like holding on to the end of a rainbow in your hand, twisting and twirling it around. I still have the sarongs and a few of the scarves, although I recently gifted the purple scarf to my best friend Rachel's mother, Linda. As I've gotten older, I feel like gifts that mean something are worthwhile, whereas feeling like it's just that day of the year that you're supposed to buy something makes me annoyed. I guess you would say I don't like doing something unless there's meaning in it. I do things I don't enjoy all the time because that is what life requires, but I don't have to enjoy it. I try to recreate those long-lost scents of that sweetly intense incense that only Bali can create, and I never have found anything comparable. I also regret not asking for both 8 feet tall locally produced Balinese paintings in the divorce. However, honestly, as beautiful as they both were, I'm quite happy just looking at the more colorful of the two Lucas and I purchased when I visit with my sister Katie. I gave her one of the paintings as a gift after our trip. Beautiful Balinese women wrapped in vivid blues and golds evoked a feeling of being in some mystical place unknown to the rest of the world. Their long, slender arms wrapped in golden wristlets, displaying various meaningful hand gestures as if in the middle of a dance. The paintings were purchased, rolled up, and carried onto the plane back to Guam with us. You could count on one hand the number of peddlers that pushed a little too much. Most of the merchants had plenty of people buying their wares, and therefore a quick thank you and a smile would suffice for them to move on. The main source of income for the people on Bali includes revenue from the rice paddy industry and tourism, which makes money from the purchase of the locals' beautiful handmade artwork, intricate wood carvings, and silver and gold jewelry. In the hotel, the attendants were more than accommodating. We were able to get a couple's massage, and I was able to have my hair beautifully French braided for barely anything monetarily. Ever since I was a little girl, I loved having someone play with my hair. Larissa would ask to play with it in grade school, and I would sit as long as allowed in our small classroom while she braided it, took out the braids, and then braided it again. Had it not been for the massive black ants that fell from the tree branches above onto my head and shoulders while walking under the lush foliage inside the hotel, I would have had nothing to complain about. I think they were in the room too, but we were barely there, so it didn't matter. Also, there was a tree in the hotel. How could anyone complain about something as enchanting as that? I'm sure the ants were there far before I or the hotel existed, and they'll be there when we are gone. The couple's massage was a little awkward, as I don't recall ever having a massage before, and Lucas and I were at an odd point in our marriage. 2 Balinese women came in, and we were both instructed to strip to our underwear on our separate beds. We lay on our stomachs underneath the cool, crisp, white sheets, while the woman gave a pretty intense massage. Their soft fingers held an amazing amount of strength, and after a few moments, I fell asleep. Once they were done, Lucas tipped them, we got dressed, and we all went about our business. I don't think the thought crossed my mind as to whether or not Lucas received special massages in Korea. If it had, I don't think I would have cared as long as he stayed away from me. He wasn't repugnant or hideous. I just had no feelings for him anymore. I looked at him like a past friend that I held memories in common with, but that I didn't want to be alone with. It's bizarre that we were able to go on this trip together and that we had a very good time. We enjoyed the sights and the food, even though there was this growing fracture between the two of us. Lucas kept trying to pull us closer together, and I just kept pushing further away. I don't know if Lucas planned anything that we did or that we just winged it, but Bali could be a very romantic place for those who were romantically inclined. On one of the days, we drove to the top of a mountain encircled by rice paddies. It looked like some sort of botanical garden, and the paddies were the intended design meant to catch your eye. We ate at a restaurant at the very top, overlooking the entire area. It was breathtaking, and the air was so clean. I can't even remember what we ate, but I can still smell the crispness of the air. I can feel the rattan table that we sat at. My eyes were so busy devouring this completely novel scenery that there was no room left in my mind to remember the taste of the food. A Gurig took us to several temples while we were in Bali, and he made sure to let us know that you had to wear a sarong to cover your legs and a sash to separate the top half of your body from the bottom half when entering a temple. The sash is worn as a sign of respect, signifying modesty and proper attire, and they are typically paired with a sarong to cover the legs, thus being deemed the proper dress to show reverence for the Hindu deities and local customs. If you came to a temple without these things, you could normally purchase them outside from a vendor. It seemed like there were shrines and temples everywhere, which would make sense considering the Balinese have many different ceremonies. They are really honoring 3 religions rolled into one. I'm not sure if it was part of a ceremony, but we were able to watch some sort of event that children the age of 5 to 8 took part in. They were all dressed in ornately decorated and colorful garments, and they were standing in front of what appeared to be a temple with a gold door. The little Balinese girls wore golden headdresses, much like the shape of the sun, and the boys wore drawn-on black goatees with tiny mustaches, and they held fake spears. They all looked profoundly serious, and at the same time, their parents stood around just as I would at a school performance. I'll never know exactly what was going on, but I was honored to be a part of it and for their parents to allow me to photograph it. As we drove to the temples on dirt roads with vast rice paddies surrounding them, I noticed that there was poor sanitation. I was also surprised at the little amount of money we needed to eat while we were there. We were able to get a small pizza that only cost about $3 at one point. What in the world were we doing eating Pizza Hut when we were in Bali? I'll chalk that up to being stupid Americans and wanting instant meal gratification as opposed to enduring the slightest bit of hunger in anticipation of a meal worth the calories. Something that stood out to me was that for the most part, the people seemed content and not wanting. A man was offering to sell us pot from an alleyway on the way back to the hotel, to which we graciously declined. Remember what I told you about not wanting to get kicked out of the military? There was a group of adorable, round-faced small children selling flowers at the Uluwatu Sea Temple, but generally speaking, no one was begging. I don't recall seeing any adults asking for money. They could have been there. I may have been too enamored with Bali's beauty to notice them. There were, however, a lot of long-tailed macaw monkeys lining the walkways and walls going to the temples. The monkeys were generally harmless. However, when a Gurig brought us to Monkey Forest, he made sure we understood that the monkeys liked potatoes and they loved bananas. And if you did not hide your bananas, they would chase you for them. Needless to say, we hid our bananas. These monkeys are also notorious for snatching visitors' belongings such as flip-flops, cameras, and sunglasses. Supposedly, they can be persuaded into ransoming the items for fruit, nuts, or candies, although this only encourages them to steal more. We didn't experience any of the thefts or the need for ransoming items, but man, what a smart bunch of creatures. The Uluwatu Sea Temple is located in South Kuta, Badang. It's built at the edge of a 70-meter-high cliff or rock projecting into the sea. When Lucas and I went there, it wasn't extremely crowded, and we slowly meandered up the stone path with the sea directly to our side, depending on the direction we were going. The waves crashed at the base of the cliff, and the water was a deep blue to the depth. It was mildly comical watching Lucas maneuver the stairs in his sarong. He wore shorts, and everyone had to cover their legs when going into a temple. Or at least that's what they told him for shits and giggles. During our excursion, we visited a small water temple adorned with a swastika, a symbol whose significance I didn't fully grasp at the time, unless you count what Americans have been taught about World War II. The ancient icon, the right-facing or clockwise and the left-facing or counterclockwise, holds deep spiritual and cultural meaning across Eurasian traditions. Known as the swastika when left-facing, it has long been revered in Indian religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism as a symbol of divinity, auspiciousness, and spirituality. Historically, the swastika also represented good fortune and prosperity in the Western world. In the 1930s, the right-facing, tilted version became a hallmark of Nazi symbolism, which left an endearing association with hatred and oppression. Despite this dark chapter, the swastika remains a powerful emblem of positivity and sacredness in Hindu and Buddhist cultures today, prominently used in countries like India, Nepal, Mongolia, China, and Japan. Aguirre treated us to an unforgettable journey, showcasing the breathtaking Mount Batur, an active volcano nestled within 2 concentric calderas northwest of Mount Agung. This natural wonder left us in awe of its raw power and beauty. It also had me wondering how many people have fallen in accidentally, or quite possibly on purpose, during some sort of religious ceremony. Luckily, I was nowhere near the specimen any religious sect would deem holy enough to serve as a sacrifice, and therefore I wouldn't have to be worried in the least about being engulfed within the bowels of the volcano. The last eruption was in 2000, which coincides with my trip to Bali. I guess the odds were in my favor that I wasn't sacrificed during this time. The ancient 9th century sanctuary, Go Gaja Elephant Cave, located near Ubud, offered a fascinating glimpse into Bali's rich spiritual and cultural history. It's widely believed to have served as a sacred site for spiritual meditation, which today me would have eaten up and could have possibly been a truly enlightening experience. Year 2000 me was just overcome with the beauty of the stone carvings on the entrance to the cave and around the temple. We were not allowed inside the cave, but we did get a photo in front of it, and the large gaping mouth of the demon looked like it would swallow us up. This whole scene makes my goofy smile all the more ridiculous. The complex also contains 7 statues of women, out of which one has been destroyed due to an earthquake, holding water pitchers that depict 7 holy rivers of India: the Ganga River, Sarasvati River, Yamuna River, Godavari River, Sindhu River, Kavari River, and Narmada River. It's interesting to me that their culture would give such a huge responsibility to a woman. Coming from America with a high school education, I would have thought only men would have been given tasks of physical strength. And this is why my traveling has been the source of so much of my edification and insight. Our next destination was the mesmerizing Puragawalawa Bat Cave Temple, a sacred Balinese Hindu temple nestled in Klungkung, Bali. We were allowed far enough into this cave that we could look above and see the endless rows of little nectar bats clinging to the ceiling. Luckily for us, they eat fruit, and not the blood of humans. Yes, I know, I watch way too many horror movies. We had the incredible opportunity to witness a barong and Chris dance. We were each given a place to sit on a wooden bench closest to the performance, no doubt because Aguirre was our guide and had connections. We sat and watched as the Balinese performers brought to life the timeless battle of good versus evil in a way that was both captivating and wildly entertaining. Barong, the king of spirits and guardian angel, represents virtue and protection. He takes the form of a majestic lion with flowing white fur, shimmering gold ornaments, and mirror accents. Rangda, the fearsome queen of demons, opposes him, leading an army of dark forces. The 2 mythical figures engage in an eternal struggle, symbolizing the balance of life and nature. This dance is more than just a performance. It's a mesmerizing blend of myth, spirituality, and artistry that had us on the edge of our seats one moment and chuckling at the playful antics of the performers the next. It was an unforgettable experience. On our final day in Bali, we visited a serene beach where I found myself perched on a smooth, rocky outcrop at the water's edge, determined to capture the perfect photo. As I focused on the shot, a sudden wave crashed against the rocks, nearly sweeping me into the sea. This moment was a thrilling reminder of nature's power. It was also a reminder that maybe I should pay a little more attention to my surroundings. Bali was nothing short of breathtaking, worth far more than any price paid. From the vibrant green rice paddies that seemed to stretch endlessly to the ever-smiling, contented locals, every moment was a testament to the island's magic. I left Bali with a profound sense of admiration, wishing to one day find the same peace and harmony that its people seem to embody so effortlessly. When we returned to Guam, Lucas and I took a nighttime walk along Tumon Bay. The moonlight danced on the water, creating a serene backdrop for a conversation I knew I couldn't avoid. I told him, gently but honestly, that I just didn't have feelings for him. I admitted I wasn't sure if I ever would, and while I wasn't trying to hurt him, it was something that needed to be said. To his credit, he handled it with surprising grace. I think deep down, he already knew we weren't meant to be. When the time came for him to leave, I told him I'd consider giving it a chance in Germany, though I couldn't make any promises. It was a bittersweet moment, full of honesty, respect, and a quiet understanding that sometimes things just don't align the way we hope. In February 2000, I left Guam to visit Lucas and my girlfriend Quinn in Korea. Lucas was stationed at Kunsan Air Base, and Quinn was just a short distance away at Osan Air Base. The night that I was leaving for Korea, two of my firefighter friends, Jovi and a gangly kid named Wright, thought it would be a great idea to douse me with a water hose. I was already packed, and I had to take off my wet clothes and put them in my travel bag and put something on that I was planning on wearing while in Korea. I honestly can't say that I was mad. Everyone had been drinking, and they were goofing off like they always were. After I changed, I found Joe V in Manja's room, and they were rolling on the floor in their board shorts laughing. Joe V looked up at me with glazed eyes and a huge grin, and he asked if I was mad, to which I laughed at him and said no. At this point in my life, I think I would be upset if something like this happened. However, in 2000, I was 22 years old and I was carefree. They weren't being malicious, they were just being kids. I don't remember who drove me to the airport, but when I got to Korea just a few short hours later, I was still laughing as I got off the plane to meet Quinn. Quinn picked me up from the airport, but I went to see Lucas from Kunsan first. I had to take a bus, think little kid's yellow school bus, and he brought me to his dorm room where I hung out with his friends while he went to work. I don't think I was supposed to be in the room, or staying there to be honest, but I was in the military and I was very good at making myself scarce when necessary, so it was not a problem. These dorms had a built-in tiki-type bar, if I remember correctly, and this was where all of the younger airmen hung out. There was always some sort of military exercise going on, and I remember this had something to do with why Quinn picked me up. Osan Air Base was a little less strict. Lucas and I left Kunsan on the same weird yellow bus, and we headed to Osan, where we got a hotel in town. When we looked out of the hotel room, we could see kimchi barrels on the roofs of other buildings. Osan was crowded. The street was lined with countless shops, stretching along what I believe was the main road leading out of Osan Air Base. This was the first time I saw people walking around wearing surgical masks, and I couldn't understand why. I guess they had a better sense of disease control, or maybe someone had seen the writing on the wall to come 20 years later. The Korean people were amazingly talented with their handicrafts. I bought handmade leather boots, a beautifully tailored women's suit, a tailored ankle-length gray wool coat, silk nightgowns, mink blankets, and other decorative items such as wood-carved masks that I sent to my mom back home. They were so efficient with their process that you could purchase whatever you wanted and ship it directly to where you wanted it to go for pennies. This was nothing compared to the food. Quinn took me to a bulgogi house, and we were brought several dishes of delicious vegetables and meats spiced to perfection. I'd never had anything like this, and as we sat on the wooden floor with our shoes removed, and I used the lettuce to wrap all the various options into a mouth-watering concoction, I thought, this is so much better than bananas dipped in chicken noodle soup. The story behind the bananas and chicken noodle soup. I met Quinn when I was 12 years old. She was a spirited girl with beautiful long red hair that made me think of strawberries that weren't completely ripe. I had gone to my very first middle school dance, and I was wearing my sister Katie's peach knee-high linen dress that didn't quite fit, so it hung off my bony shoulders a little bit. Quinn had never spoken to me before, and she walked right up to me, told me my bra was showing, and tucked it in for me. We have been best friends ever since. Sometimes I would ride my bike out past Breedsville to see her, and sometimes she would come over to my house. When she came to my house, we were limited in our food experience, so Quinn, being Quinn, would find any way to try to test out different flavors. Whereas I would be happy on occasion to open a can of peas and eat it right out of its original container. Quinn always did have a flair for finding a way to make food, and life in general, just a little more interesting. Thus, bananas and chicken noodle soup. Don't knock it till you try it. While at Osan, Quinn took me to her dorm room and introduced me to her boyfriend. And then, within a few hours, she introduced me to her current husband. We were an odd two. Most people would have been shocked, and I didn't care as long as she was happy. Who was I to judge? I had already been married once and was slowly working on my second divorce. It was highly probable that she was also in the process of getting her divorce, and she was still on good terms with her future ex-husband. It's also possible that I'm misremembering. Either way, Quinn never had a problem with the opposite sex. Later that night, Quinn brought me to the base club where we danced all night, and when we stumbled back to her dorm room, she told me about how people sometimes drunkenly fell into the Benju ditches and died because it would get so cold out at night. Temperatures during the winter months of December through February can drop as low as the mid-20s Fahrenheit, which is below freezing, people. I thought this sounded tragic. However, after researching the purpose of a Benju ditch, it is beyond tragic. They are the equivalent of toilets. People would get drunk and die in a cesspool of human excrement. I wonder if there's a Darwin Award for any of them. Being stationed at Osan Air Base meant you had certain rules you had to follow. There was a curfew for being off base, and there were certain seedy things that you couldn't do. Quinn and Lucas took me out on the town at night, and we never busted curfews or took part in anything nefarious. But the bars were all full of juicy girls and their mama-sons. Their terms, not mine. A mama-son is noted to be a female manager or proprietor, especially of bars or clubs. It was a very sad situation that these women are in. Once you walk into a bar, the mama-son starts plying you with drinks. If you are female, she wants you to stay as long as possible because you will attract more male customers who will buy more of her alcohol. If you're a male, she wants you to set your sights on one of her juicy girls who are typically not Korean. The girls dance or slowly walk around the poles in what appears to be bathing suits, sometimes topless. These girls don't want to be there. You can see it in the bored or vacant expressions on their faces. From the stories that I've been told, the girls are paying off their debts and sometimes their family's debts. Until that is done, or they can find someone to marry them and pay the debt off for them, then they will dance. Some of the girls are Filipino and some are Russian. The Russian girls are said to suffer worse conditions, but I don't personally know if that's true. If they can find an American to marry, the heartless joke is that the American will take them to the big BX. It's only a joke if you don't understand the suffering these women are going through to drive them to do what they have to. The big BX refers to America. In a lot of the spoken instances, once the woman gets to America, she divorces the American and moves along on her way as a U.S. citizen. There are a lot of ways you could look at this situation. Maybe if the American was treating the woman right and they both wanted to be together, then she wouldn't leave, and they would have a happy ending to their story. Maybe the man felt she owed him something by his saving her and didn't treat her well. Or maybe the woman just used the man to get out of the situation she was in. Regardless of the scenario, I feel for the women. The men may end up with a broken heart, but the women have come from a broken past. They've been used like playthings, and they're just trying to get out. They've been demoralized, probably physically harmed, and psychologically harmed. No one deserves this. To add context, a juicy girl is a woman who works in a juicy bar in South Korea or other Korean-populated areas throughout the world. Women are employed to sit and chat with customers and persuade them to buy drinks for themselves and expensive drinks for the women, although this is not the extent of their services. According to Jeff Skogel of the Military Times, U.S. troops in South Korea are not allowed to pay or provide anything of value to employees of a bar or any other establishment to entertain them. Army General Curtis Scaparrotti, commander of U.S. Forces Korea, wrote this in a 15 October 2014 memo. This was only after a 2002 Military Times investigation profiled a juicy girl who said she did not make enough money by selling drinks to pay off her debt to the bar owner, so she had to resort to charging U.S. service members for sex. This is what it took to then sign a document 11 years later to put a stop to the military's contribution to these heinous acts. I'm not saying that between 2002 and 2011, other memos weren't written and signed, and I'm sure the military was doing what they could to try to ensure their service members were not contributing to what comes down to human trafficking, slavery, and prostitution. I'm just saying that I was there in 2000, and other than a sign in front of Osan Air Base stating prostitution was illegal for service members, I didn't see anyone enforcing the concept. Sadly, it was the running joke among males, and for the females, we were indifferent. I just thought of them as strippers, and to be honest, every military base I'd been stationed at, other than Lackland, I never went directly off the base there, had a strip joint right outside the gate or within a very short driving distance. The Matador Club outside of Eglin Air Base was still there as of 2021, and although most of the girls are missing teeth or thought to be several months pregnant, all of the guys went there to ogle them. Guam had a local strip joint that the guys went to, which I believe was the same place one of the male military service members was sexually assaulted in the bathroom. Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany had a brothel in the neighboring Bitburg area, and I was told stories of the goings-on there. At one point, a friend of mine was said to have been kicked out for not being respectful to the worker, and instead of being completely shocked, everyone just laughed. The point is that we were all desensitized to it. It's also a free country, and there's no law against having a strip club outside the government fences. I found that if it makes money, someone will be to capitalize on that. The demoralization of women was made to be normal, as if this was what they were made for. No one ever thought of them as daughters or sisters. No one ever wondered what struggles made them come to this profession. Was it their choice? I've known very few strippers that wanted to be where they were, and I'm sure fewer of them want to be taking part in the other things occurring where they work. Raise your hand if you want a slime ball groping you. Hot, putrid breath in your face while you do your best not to vomit. I'm just not buying it. The last place Quinn took me to was to see the demilitarized zone demarcating North Korea from South Korea. This site was complete with razor wire and very serious-looking armed guards on both sides, viewed from a bus. The tour guide noted that sometimes the North and South Koreans would taunt and fire at each other. It's hard for me to understand how we can divide the world up with metal or other materials and claim those pieces belong to a certain group. The Earth belongs to no one. When we die, we go back to the Earth. But while we're here, some of us cling so tightly to what we think makes us its masters. It just seems so brutal. After the tour of the DMZ, she brought me to Changdeong Palace, a 6,000-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site, famous for its outstanding architectural details and its luxuriant and expansive gardens. There were 15 types of trees, some of which were up to 700 years old, amid the azaleas and flowering spice bushes. It was beautiful, and even in February, I remember seeing and smelling cherry blossoms on the cornelian cherry trees throughout the palace gardens. We rode back to Osan Air Base on a bus that passed thousands of shoppers and tourists, crowding into the alleyways and sidewalks of Seoul City. Billboards flashed in an overwhelming scene of something I had yet to see in my travels. So many people. There was such a contrast in a very little area, or at least that's how it seemed at the time. After Korea, I knew there was zero chance that I could ever be happy with Lucas, so I gave up on the relationship. It was callous, but it was realistic, and I was just being honest with myself. I have to say, it did get me in a bit of trouble when my captain pointed out that technically I was married, so I needed to be careful as to how things appeared. So I moved out of the dorms with my good friend Shannon in the hopes of a little more privacy. I never enjoyed feeling like a bug under a glass, even if I wasn't doing anything worth studying. I didn't like the fact that now I'd be spending more money and time on gas, but oh my goodness, when Shannon and I looked at our first option, all we could do was look at each other and exclaim, "The view." For $1,000 a month, we could rent an apartment large enough for 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and a bathroom that overlooked the Pacific Ocean on the 10th floor. There was no way we could say no to this. We moved in as soon as we could and started living our lives as mildly responsible adults. This was the first time I've ever been out on my own in the local area without a male being there for me. We would wake up in our sparsely decorated apartment and walk to the balcony to watch the sunrise, while also checking to see if anyone was at the pool below us. Occasionally, Shannon's boyfriend Dave would come over with our friends and we would barbecue. Our mutual friend Schneiders would always do a perfect rendition of the Muppet that likes to cook, the Swedish chef. And if I ever say Jesus Christ, he would correct me and tell me it should be cheese and rice. He taught me the undeniable need to always have tomato soup with grilled cheese sandwiches anytime you were hungover, which to this day is an actual remedy. Eventually, Shannon and I would begin to irritate each other. She would endlessly hack every single morning, and I was just plain crazy, so neither one of us was perfect. But generally speaking, moving out of the dorms and into the apartment was a good idea that worked in both of our favors. And if I'm being honest, Shannon was one of the best roommates a girl could have. She was brutally honest and she did her own thing. We could have lived in that apartment until we both had a PCS. which we kind of did. I feel like I was just having my issues that were creeping up on me. I was too reliant on having a male around to make me feel whole. At the same time, I wanted freedom. Maybe that's everyone at this point in their lives. Or maybe I was just very conflicted. Either way, I should have been kinder to Shannon. On 12 October 2001, I was in the apartment by myself and a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck. The hotel swayed to the left and right, and I ran outside into the hallway that was open to the world, scared that if I stayed in, I would not be safe. But being outside, I knew I would be less safe. I ran back into the apartment and hid in the bathroom until it was over, and when it was, I hightailed it down the stairs to the first floor. On my way out, I noticed the koi pond water was splashing over the edges, and I think somewhere in the melee of it all, I looked outside our balcony to see the pool below swishing with the movement. For a moment, I thought, what if I just jump? I told you I got dark sometimes. Maybe just a few days after, there were aftershocks, and I was standing in the base shopette with Schneider's when we noticed the 2-liter bottles start to fall from the display. I about lost it, but there really was nothing to do. I think I even remember Schneider's looking at me, laughing, and I finally just stopped in the middle of the store and stood, understanding that there was nothing I could do, and I started laughing too. It reminds me of a similar situation while at work in California. Some employees at a shop I was inspecting thought it would be hilarious to shake the beams below the floor I was on to make me think there was an earthquake. One of the gentlemen started yelling, "There's an earthquake! Run!" I looked at him, stood there for a moment, and then walked down the rickety steps to the door leading outside the building. When I got outside, I looked at the 2 male employees and I calmly said, "Is there an earthquake? If there is, I need to call the youth center to make sure my daughter is okay." They started laughing, and I just stood there trying to figure out what was going on. Finally, they fessed up that this was a joke they liked to play on people, and I just told them they were dorks and finished my inspection. Looking back, I do find my reaction somewhat odd. I compare it to a squirrel who freezes if an animal threatens it. They wait for the danger to pass, and then they go about their business. Or they fall out of the tree and become a meal. Your odds are 50-50 for survival, and so far, I've come out alive. We'd gotten used to weird weather in Guam. When there were hurricanes, much like in Florida, we would have hurricane parties. One of my friends, Chad, who told me at one point that he did not like me when he first met me, proceeded to run outside of the dorms in the middle of a hurricane wearing only his tidy whities. Now, Chad was not a small guy, and the entire scene was something out of a ridiculous comedy. Chad was outside screaming it was the end of the world while he was doused with torrential rains and his brown hair was whipped around by the insane wind. But this was our life, and we lived it like there was no other way. Just to get an idea of Chad's full scope of weirdness, at various points throughout my time at Saipan Hall, Chad could be found wielding a machete while outside of your dorm room screaming that the communists, were coming, or something to that effect. We lived for the Chads in our lives. They brought a semblance of calm to a world that expected so much of us. Not to be outdone, Manj fell off the 3rd story of the dorms after a night of drinking, and when he woke up, he swore to me that he had ringworm while he shoved his side into my face so that I could get a closer look at the ring-like impression on his tanned skin. At some point, it was discovered that it wasn't ringworm. Manj had fallen on a metal bottle cap, and due to the height of the fall, he'd been left with the imprint of the bottle cap's crimped edges. How we didn't die during most of these occurrences is a miracle to me. And the winner of who did the most bizarre thing would go to Ronald, who decided that it would be a great idea to rip out his own front tooth from his mouth with a hammer. I watched as his kid came happily walking out of the dorm hallway to proudly display his bloodied mouth and missing tooth. I tell you these stories because if I didn't, you wouldn't know what it was like on a daily life at Saipan Hall. We were a bunch of young, crazy kids who had very little adult guidance other than while we were at work. We partied hard and we looked out for each other, for the most part, considering most of us were too inebriated to look out for ourselves. I'm surprised the worst that came out of our shenanigans was the appearance of ringworm and a missing tooth. In case you're wondering, by the way, Ronald got himself a new tooth. However, we don't know for sure if he kept it or decided that it should join its predecessor. In walks Steve, the dark-haired loner, who likes to physically recreate the motions like he's playing the drums as he moves his head up and down, accentuating the bird-like structure of his aquiline nose, set in the middle of 2 almond-shaped blue eyes. No one liked Steve. Let me restate that. Only me, his fellow dirt boys, and my girlfriend Paula liked Steve. Steve was an odd duck, which is probably why I liked him. He stayed to himself, and he spoke with a semi-nasally voice. I believe I met him at Hard Rock Cafe when I was out with my current group of friends, who little by little left me as I forged a stronger connection with Steve. I think Michelle may have liked him, and when I met Steve, I was initially trying to set him up with my friend Bree, but in the end, Steve and I became good friends and went all over the island together. Steve was from Iowa. However, I recall that he always talked about going to Colorado for some reason. We hung out almost every day, even after I moved into the apartment with Shannon. I think this is what caused the rift between me and Shannon. Once I remember going to the park near the track on base with him and Michelle, and we just acted goofy the entire time playing on the children's playground equipment. None of the guys I used to hang out with liked him. Apparently, something went down with him once, and they always said he was the character Morgan, played by Casey Affleck, from the 1997 movie Good Will Hunting. They said you couldn't trust him, and he was not to be a part of their group. I did what I wanted, so I slipped between both of their worlds. Out of curiosity, I finally watched the fight scene from Good Will Hunting. The main characters were driving in a car when they passed a group they didn't like. Will Hunting, played by Matt Damon, asked Chucky Sullivan, played by Ben Affleck, to pull over so they could all get out and fight the other group. Morgan was in the back seat saying he wasn't going to get out of the car, and Chucky said if he didn't, then Chucky would beat his ass. Eventually, Morgan got out of the car and assisted in the assault, which therein confuses me because my understanding was that Steve completely refused to get out of the car. Either way, I'll never see Casey Affleck the same after imagining him as Steve. Good thing I don't watch a lot of movies with Casey Affleck. Steve and I mostly hung out with each other, but sometimes we would hang out with his fellow dirt boys. And on one occasion, I got pretty perturbed at the girl who was with his friend at her house. She insinuated that something was going to occur between the four of us that I was not on board for. To make matters worse, she had a small toddler that was running around the house at the time. The whole thing made me sick to my stomach. I left and went scraping past one of their vehicles in my GMC Jimmy in a fit of rage and disgust. Steve followed me back to the dorms, apologizing profusely, and only my children and a select few know where/what that got him. I think I had my jealous streak well into my late 20s. I wasn't always good at controlling my temper, and I know I could have handled it better. Hindsight is 20/20, right? In January 2001, I took a short trip to Cairns, Australia with Steve. Cairns is a city in the Cairns region of Queensland, Australia, on the tropical northeast coast of far north Queensland. It is a transition port from a shanty town to a modern city. The Aboriginal population, the first recorded human occupants of Cairns, is believed to have entered Australia at least 60,000 years ago. Yidinji is the Australian traditional Aboriginal language. However, everyone we encountered spoke English. This is most likely due to the first semi-permanent British presence being established in the late 1860s by the Bêche des Mers fishermen. Once William Hahn found gold in 1872, it was over. A large influx of prospectors became the basis of the first non-Indigenous population. I found it interesting that the airline ticket for this trip was not very expensive. However, when we arrived, we paid a lot more for dining out and excursions as compared to my Bali vacation. Our hotel overlooked the city. I remember that it just seemed so big, the hotel and the city. The cab ride from the airport just appeared to have people teeming along the streets, as you would see in a large city. But remember, I grew up in a small town and only had been in a few states, Korea, Bali, and Guam. I don't feel like any of them had the same level of activity that Cairns seemed to have. On our first day there, we took a ride on the Kuranda Scenic Railway. Search for a suitable route for a railway to the coast began in March of 1882, and the railroad was completed/opened in 1891. This railroad was powered at the head by a 1720 class diesel-electric locomotive, and it ran on a track 327 meters above sea level over the far north Queensland's wet tropics World Heritage Rainforest. As we sat comfortably on this warm and dry day, we took in spectacular sights, including waterfalls, which were found in the Din Din, Barron Gorge, and horses grazing in their pastures. I'm sure I looked like quite the tourist in my white t-shirt, khaki shorts, and camera forever dangling around my neck. While in Kuranda, we visited the largest butterfly flight aviary and exhibit in Australia, the Australian Butterfly Sanctuary. It was just a short walk from the Curanda Scenic Railway Station and was home to over 1,200 butterflies from a variety of species. I felt like I was seeing the entire rainbow of vibrant colors as green, blue, yellow, orange, and red delicately fluttered around me, only stopping to occasionally rest on the waxy green leaves you had to barely reach out to touch. Nature has a way of centering you, and I found myself at peace in this sanctuary. Some may not consider snakes quite so peaceful. However, I was up for anything, and I decided I would push myself to do something I had never done before. I held a snake for the first time in my life. It was surprising to me that the smallish snake felt silky and not slimy at all. It gave me a better appreciation for the creatures that have a pretty bad reputation. We saw so many animals that I had never seen before. There were black and brown emus, flightless birds endemic to Australia, which looked sort of like an ostrich. Emu mating is more monogamous than ostriches, who mate with multiple females in a season. Which is happier? I'd love to know. We only saw dingoes in captivity, as they're difficult to spot in the wild. This is not the case for California coyotes that have run past me on the athletic trail I used to frequent on the base. On one occasion, I remember jogging with my daughter as I pushed my toddler son in his stroller, and we passed several coyotes. They howled, and I looked at my daughter and said, "Run!" Needless to say, our little family adventure was over quickly. Back to dingoes. A dingo is an ancient basal lineage of a dog found in Australia. The one we saw had orange and white fur. There were wombats and koala bears munching on leaves while lounging in the trees. The wombat is a close relative to the koala. However, they're different enough to know why you would have typically a stuffed koala bear as a child as opposed to a wombat. The koala is way cuter. The albino kangaroos were something new to me. They're rare in Australia with a genetic mutation that causes their skin and fur to be snow white, and it only occurs in about 1 in every 100,000 kangaroos. In my family, we carry a genetic trait for albinism. It's found on my maternal grandmother's side. We were allowed to feed the kangaroos while we walked around, and mother kangaroos and wallabies with their baby joeys reacted docilely. I think I was more afraid of them than they were of me, but after a few moments, the fear passed. Steve and I took a tour that included snorkeling in the outer reef, which is part of the Great Barrier Reef, furthest from the mainland, and is where the coral system meets the Coral Sea. The outer reef is home to a variety of marine life, including coral-dwelling fish, deep water fish, and reef sharks. I went in for a bit, however, Steve was seasick, and he just hovered at the side of the small boat the entire time, heaving. Some of the passengers saw reef sharks while we were visiting their watery home, and when I heard shark, I have to admit, I decided I'd go check on Steve and get out of the water. I stood next to Steve while he continued to feed the fish his lunch. The outer reef is less affected by human impact and runoff because it's further away from the mainland. Currently, the Great Barrier Reef is showing some signs of recovery, but it still has an overall prognosis of further degradation caused by coral bleaching, loss of coral cover, outbreaks of crown-of-thorns starfish, pollution from farming runoff, ships and plastic, coastal development, and illegal fishing. I wonder how we as humans would enjoy it if someone came into our home and just started destroying it. I wish more of us would consider this when we do things that destroy our environment in these creatures' homes. Before we left, we wandered around Cairns Esplanade, Main Street, and popped into the Blue Oyster Bar. I couldn't help myself after growing up watching the 1984 movie Police Academy. Talk about some fancy footwork in that scene. I managed to upset Steve while at the bar, imagine that, and he left me there to find my way back to the hotel. If I had to bet, the reason he was upset would have been due to my penchant for talking to random strangers, more than likely of the male persuasion. Whether or not I was flirting, I really don't know, but I vaguely remember dancing with a blonde Aussie, and it wasn't long after that when I noticed that Steve had left the building. In his defense, I don't blame him. In my defense, I was not dirty dancing. I still resembled the spider monkey on a sugar high. I honestly don't know how I managed to get back. I have a very poor sense of direction and could get lost in my backyard. I still wonder if he even silently hid to make sure I found my way back, or if he just threw up his hands and left me to my own devices. I will always admit that I'm not an easy person to understand, or to probably be around for a long period. But I hope I've raised my children well enough not to leave a friend alone in a new country where they could get hurt. Needless to say, this is where I lost interest in Steve. One of my last memories of Guam involved my good friend Paula. I was currently living in the dorms again, awaiting my PCS to Spangdahlem, Germany. And Paula had recently got married to an airman from public health. He was medium height, not very attractive, and I never thought he had much of a personality. But to each their own. Paula showed up at my dorm room very late at night, hysterically crying and bleeding from her thumb. She had gotten into a fight with her husband over a videotape he had that showed him hanging out with another female. This videotape was from before he had married or was dating Paula. Paula got very upset and proceeded to smash the videotape, which somehow led to her stabbing herself in the thumb with the plastic. She then got in her vehicle and drove to me. I tried to console her, and she finally fell asleep in my twin bed next to me. When she woke up, she started frantically looking around the bed and floor for her wedding ring. It was a pretty large diamond. I reminded her that she told me that night that she had removed it during the fight and thrown it at him. She had been drinking. She didn't remember that and swore it was in my room. I stood by the door of the room and I calmly said, "Feel free to look anywhere you want." I don't know if she ever found her ring or if she went back to her husband, but I hope she wasn't insinuating that I took her ring. Remember what we talked about earlier when it came to stealing? Not this girl anymore. If it's not mine, I'm not taking it. Besides, I prefer pretty colorful rocks over diamonds. In 2006, the movie Blood Diamond came out, and after watching how children are used to mine diamonds, which are then sold by rebel groups to subsidize illegal military action, terrorism, and war efforts, I never want to own another diamond in my life. My last trip while in Guam was to Honolulu, Hawaii in March 2002. This was only for a 2-day stopover before I went to my next base, Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany. Steve managed to arrange his exit out of the Air Force to coincide with my PCS. He believed we would continue to talk to each other, and if I'm being honest, he felt that we had a deep emotional connection. If you've learned nothing about me, I'm very good at compartmentalizing and self-preservation. It's a self-defense mechanism I have honed over the years. I'm not saying it's the nicest attribute, but it's an attribute of mine nonetheless. We visited the beaches, the Honolulu Zoo, which had huge sea turtles, and saw massive banyan trees. The banyan tree is not native to the islands, it's native to India. The canopies are vast and seem to drip their roots to the ground below. Kids love to swing from those roots and climb among the nooks and crannies of intricately intertwined trunks. I wasn't sure what the rules were, and we'd established that I'm ever the rule follower, so I just stood underneath and appreciated it. In early August 2023, a series of wildfires broke out in Hawaii, predominantly on the island of Maui. The wind-driven fires prompted evacuations and caused widespread damage, killing at least 102 people and leaving 2 people missing in the town of Lahaina. After the devastation, tourists began trickling back to Hawaii, and there was some pushback from the locals as they were trying to restore things as best as they could, considering the damage. According to recent 2023 visitor spending, tourism brings in approximately $20.78 billion to Hawaii, which represents a significant portion, 20 to 25%, of the state's gross domestic product, GDP. I fully understand the frustration of the Hawaiian people as the tourists start to return, possibly appearing oblivious to the devastation and only focusing on speedy and exemplary service. However, I would also think that, like many things in life, the solution isn't as easy as shutting down all travel to the area, with the caveat being that it's safe to travel to the area. I think maybe if the tourists are educated before visiting about the circumstances of where they will be arriving, then with a little compassion, they might all find their visit to be a win-win situation. Here's for trying to see the glass half full, not one of my natural personality traits. In about 2022, I caught up with Monjan Schneiders, and I found out that Schneiders retired as a master sergeant only after being blown up while leading a convoy in the Middle East. He was the same as when I last saw him in Guam, wearing his board shorts. Except for FaceTime, he wasn't wearing board shorts. He was driving his very nice car across a very large bridge in Florida. He was stationed in Guam for 3 years, and I was only there for 15 months. Now he sells real estate in Florida, has 4 adorable kids, and lives in a beautiful home on the water of St. Petersburg, Florida. We sat on the phone and FaceTime for 30 minutes, and not once did he point out how crazy I looked with my gray head wrap on, no makeup, sitting there in my office chair wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt. I did make it to Florida in November of 2024 to attend my godson's graduation from the Florida State Guard at Camp Blanding Joint Training Center near Stark, Florida. And while there, my partner of 13 years and I stayed near St. Petersburg, Florida for a little art and to celebrate his birthday. The Tampa area had recently been hit by Hurricane Milton in early October, which peaked as a Category 5 storm, making it the second Category 5 storm of the 2024 season. We were worried we wouldn't be able to make it to the graduation because it looked like another tropical storm was brewing the week we were heading out to Florida. Our worries were nothing compared to what the people of Florida had experienced in 2024. Hurricane Debbie began to form at the end of July 2024 and made landfall on 5 August near Steinhatchee, Florida. The system pushed a storm surge of 3 to 5 feet above ground across portions of the Nature Coast and Big Bend. Hurricane Helene followed shortly thereafter, reaching a Category 4 by the evening of September 26. This storm brought heavy rains, winds, and plenty of damage to coastal areas in the Tampa Bay region. Then came Milton, as we briefly discussed. Milton left a path of damage, flooding, and power outages across most of Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. When we arrived in early November, there were still piles of debris on sidewalks, waiting to be collected, and destroyed buildings with the residents attempting to put their lives back together. The restaurants that we went to were thankful for the business as they were just now opening back up, and the employees spoke of how they had been out of work for weeks. Not only were they cleaning up the decimation, where that was even an option, but they were also trying to pay their bills and put food on their table. During some of our conversations with the waitresses and waiters, we determined that the people of Florida were a strong group. As I talked of my pathetic problems, 2 different individuals reassured me that I was being too hard on myself. These people had lost so much, and they were reassuring me. Another woman selling me a t-shirt for my daughter apologized for taking so long to get to the register, and I told her she had nothing to apologize for. As I looked into her weary eyes, I asked her if she was okay. She replied that she was doing much better than most who had lost their home. How do you respond to that? I wanted to cry and hug her. My heart goes out to those people. Needless to say, I didn't reach out to Schneider's while we were in his area. I thought it would be in bad taste at the time. My chat with Monge revealed that he had been married to his wife for 22 years and had 2 beautiful daughters. He retired from the Air Force, worked as a contractor, and now works as a DoD civilian plumber in Florida. Monge is just as easygoing as I remember, and if you catch him on a weekend, he may show you his bottle cap scar. Through the 2 of them, I found out that Gunther is a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, which is something I never saw coming. But I can, now that I'm older. Gunther was a funny guy. He was very fit, and he knew it. All the girls loved him, but he was polyamorous, and no one was ever able to capture his attention for long. It was heartbreaking to find out that we've lost several of our friends over the expanse of these 22-plus years. Dave lost his short battle with cancer, lymphoma, at 39 years of age in 2019. He leaves a wife, a daughter, and a son that looks exactly like him. Sean, one of our firefighter friends, committed suicide several years ago, and Cody died in a car accident. It's hard to think of life without them out there, somewhere. Their smiling faces and their laughter filling the air, making the world a lighter place. I remember the last time I talked to Dave years ago, and he was in Nevada with his new wife. He sounded happy, and we talked about meeting up. Now he's gone. Every year I get older, another friend falls. A smart man once said that you have 2 choices in life. You can grow old, or you can die young. I wish they had all grown old. I also wish I had been more upfront with Steve. I should have just told him that once we left Guam or Hawaii, for that matter, I would probably never speak to him again. Instead, I let it drag on, and he called me months later when I had gotten to Spangdahlem, moved out of my second ex-husband's house, and met Jackson. I vividly remember getting his phone call on my prepaid flip phone. I answered while Jackson sat next to me in his room, and Steve started chattering away. After a few minutes, I told him that he shouldn't call anymore, that I'd moved on in life and there was no future for us. He began screaming every expletive you could imagine into the receiver. I hung up and didn't answer his call ever again. Hell hath no fury like a man scorned. I'm not proud of hurting this person. I use this experience to explain to my son that women can be vindictive and manipulative, heartless even. I wouldn't say I manipulated Steve other than letting him think there could be something more between us, but it was cruel. Broken people don't always make the best people. It's no one's job to fix them either. No one can fix them but themselves, and they have to want to fix themselves. Once they realize that they're broken and they want to be fixed, the whole world is full of people who are there to support their journey.